Bad meetings aren't just annoying, they're expensive.
Because when people don't feel engaged or included, teams lose clarity and good ideas.
Today, Jodie Goldberg breaks down how collective intelligence can change the way we meet and work.
Hi, I'm Claude.
And I'm Jess.
We are corporate employees by day, entrepreneurs by night, and work besties for life.
Join us as we explore how work besties lift each other up, laugh through the chaos, and thrive together in every industry.
Work Besties!
Work Besties! Welcome back. June is all about communication and transformation, how we collaborate, influence, and create better ways of working together.
And today we are tackling one of the biggest places that all of that either comes alive or completely falls apart. Meetings.
Jodie, welcome to Work Besties Who Podcast. You say people may show up for the content, but what they're truly seeking is connection. And I love that so much. What led you into this work?
Well, hi, everyone. Jess, Claude, thank you for having me. So look, really, we are experiencing a true loneliness epidemic. It's clear that as people, we just want to be seen. And as author Sherry Turkell says, she coined this term that I really believe in, which is that we might be surrounded by people, but we feel alone. And the term she coined is we're alone together. Doesn't that
sad.
Sad, right?
I know. It really hits you.
It does. And there are so many reasons why this is the case. First, social media. With the rise of social media and technology, we just haven't developed the soft skills needed to really have those face-to-face interactions. We're working in seemingly more remote work environments, which means that we have fewer opportunities to be in connection with other people. And now we have AI. AI is doing a lot of that connecting on behalf of us, right?
Totally.
It's true. And listen, as human beings, we crave connection. We do. A decades-long Harvard study shared that the quality of our relationships is the single strongest predictor of the quality of our lives. And yet, so many of us just don't know how to build those relationships and realize that it's a real skill and that it takes real skill, it takes real intention and real strategy. So all of these reasons sort of led me to really start thinking about that while we crave connection, we just don't know how to design it. And really, this is one of the reasons why I've started to really partner with teams and organizations to help them see relationship building and connection as a strategic skill-based practice.
We love this. This is kind of the whole reason why we started our podcast to begin with. When you think about going back to the pandemic in 2020 and coming back from that, the workplace environment changed dramatically. And all of those areas and opportunities where people would find ways to connect weren't happening. And we noticed it, and Claude and I became very close. We became work besties, and we noticed really succinctly how anytime we were in the office and chatting and giggling, or even in Zoom meetings or team meetings or whatever type of organizational opportunity where we could lift each other up, the mode and the emotions from the others changed dramatically. And you just
still now, if you think about it, everybody's aware now. I had a question because you just said designed, those connections. But for me, connection is something that is natural, that don't have to be designed. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I'm not saying that we need to create artificial connections. But I think it's as leaders, we forget what it really means to help people feel like they can be in deep connection with one another. And it means that different environments call for different strategies, right? If we're meeting for the first time with a group of people, we need to be strategic about the relationship building practices that we want to put in place, right? Our job is to help create connection in the group. But if a group has been meeting for 10 years over and over and over again, we're not going to utilize an icebreaker question like, what's your favorite ice cream, right? Our job there is to help deepen connection. And I think as leaders, we forget that there's strategy behind this. So I think that's what makes it super challenging. I'll also share I like to say there are about 7 different factors to consider as a leader in order to think about what is the best relational strategy to use. I like to say tone of the meeting or gathering. Is this a energetic tone or a more calm tone, right? Group size. I'm going to have a different relational strategy if it's a larger group versus if it's a smaller group. Familiarity. How well does the group know each other? What are the factors that are going on internally within an organization, right? If there's a lot of unrest within an organization or a lot of tension, I'm going to have a different strategy than if everything feels calm and peaceful. The same goes with externally. There's a lot of political unrest in our world, or there are other things happening. It's my job as a leader to acknowledge that into the space as well. So these are just some of those factors to consider beyond familiarity when thinking about how do we help design relationships that feel intentional and authentic for the moment.
And Jodie, do you think, as you commented, there is this epidemic of loneliness? Do you find that there are certain ways that the manager should be providing that versus, say, times when it's more peer-to-peer?
It's a great question. I think one of the most often misconceptions we have or leaders have about work is that it's not just their job to help their employees manage tasks, right? Part of what I think separates a manager from a leader is somebody who recognizes the role that relationships play in the workplace, and that it's actually the job of a leader to help manage some of those relationships. So while I know that peer relationships are important and those happen more organically, it's really the job of the leader, I think, or the manager to really take note of how do we help this person manage a task in front of them? And also, how do we help them feel seen, heard, and valued, right? Because when you feel seen, you feel more psychologically safe. And when you feel more psychologically safe, you feel more empowered to take risks, to try things on, to be more creative in the work environment.
That's interesting. Go ahead, Claude. You're mute. I was going to say that's interesting. So I agree with you that I think a manager helps facilitate that, creates that motive opportunity, and really creates the sense of the team dynamic. But isn't there still a role and responsibility of those that are peer-to-peer, right? Because if you think about it, I am a manager, right? As a manager of teams, I can only do so much. And yes, I do try and customize and create that sense of openness for each individual because everybody's different. But there aren't times that managers can do that fully for you.
Yeah, no, and I didn't mean to minimize that. I think for managers, it's more about awareness.
Okay.
But we know the impact of having a work best friend, right?
Yeah.
Like there was a Gallup poll that was done, which talked about how when you have a work best friend in the workplace, like,
You're
the two
so
of
much
you,
more productive.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And right, do think though the role of the manager is to be aware, right, of what is happening. And I think a lot of times we see the managers really only aware of the tasks, right, rather than how to help, like, of the relationships and how, like, real workplace flourishing takes
Okay.
an awareness of what kinds of relationships are happening in the workplace, right? And it might not be the manager's job to help facilitate those all the time, but to be aware that it's about relationship management as well.
And
so can we break that down? Because when you say that we don't want the manager does need to get tasks done.
Of course.
But it's not just about the tasks. It is about encouraging and making your employees feel seen and heard. What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think it just depends on the setting, right? But I think part of what happens when you have an employee who is especially new to the workplace, right? Like they're really trying to understand the culture of the work environment, right? And I think as a manager, it's their job to help to create part of that opening for them and invite them in, and also to create that space where they feel empowered, right? I think it's really easy in a work environment to feel like your voice doesn't matter. And so I think as a manager, really creating that space to help understand your strengths and help to think about how might we capitalize those strengths within our work environment and beyond.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like if we think about the manager being like a parent, right? They are going to schedule the play dates, but at the end of the day, it's up to the kids to be able to do their things. So I do like that the manager, their job, of course, is the tasks, making sure that all the deliverables are being done. But at the same time, like you say, being aware, but also encouraging those relationship within.
Okay, so Jodie, one of the things we were curious about from you and that we've seen from your background is in many cases as a manager, you are bringing your whole team together, very different personality, very different ideologies and things that they personally want to get across. And you are there to get a task done. From your perspective, what is the areas where things could go wrong or could go right when you bring them all together?
Yeah. So let's even give ourselves maybe a container, like a meeting, right?
Yeah, perfect.
I think that feels really great. So when we have people from across, the organization coming together for meetings, the number one thing I see is that there's a lack of purpose in these meetings or gatherings, just to begin with, right? That we're coming together and there's not a real purpose to why we are coming together. Maybe we're coming together because we come together on Mondays, right? But that's not a purpose, right?
Right.
That's just something that we do. Purpose is really articulating the why. And when we can articulate the why of a meeting or gathering, then everyone in the group knows how to show up and knows how to prepare for that meeting or gathering, right? And we rarely see that within our work environments. And that can feel really challenging. I think the second thing that often happens is we come together and meet without clear norms, right? And I see this a lot within meetings, right? Everyone shows up and the norms are sort of implicit, right? We just sort of follow what's always been done rather than intentionally think about how we might co-create norms or behaviors so that people feel like they can contribute no matter what their views are. And that, right, again, takes a leader that's aware that a meeting is not just about accomplishing tasks, but it's about helping people feel seen throughout the process.
Can you explain to me, like, what are the norms?
Yeah, norms is like, I feel like it's like facilitator speak in a lot of ways, but it's like really coming together and thinking together, right? In this group, how might we be able to show up for one another, right? What are a few behaviors that we might want to surface that we think are just important for all of us to agree upon in order to have a successful meeting, right? Some of those things might be leading with curiosity, right? If we don't know something, instead of saying, I don't know that or I don't like that, right? Being curious, right? Asking curious questions in order to better understand what that person might be sharing. Or step up, step back, which is one of my favorites, which is so many times in meeting, one voice dominates the conversation. So really surfacing that in our gathering, in order for us to feel like we can belong here, to be aware of how much space we're taking up, step forward and when we can step back. So those are just some examples. And when we can agree to even 3 or 4 of those, we see that a meeting's purpose becomes a little bit clearer, but also we feel like we can hold each other a little bit more deeply.
So, do you think as a manager, it's also our task to make sure that everybody is being listened, is being heard, etc.? What happens when you have those people that keep on talking or repeating someone else, in a different words? So as a manager or participant, how can you stop this behavior? Because it's not that easy, right? And a lot of time those behavior are sometimes a little bit up in the chain. So how would you do that?
Yeah, I think it's a fabulous question. And I think one of the things that I've noticed is that when you hear somebody speaking repeatedly over and over and over again, sometimes it's because they like to talk, but a lot of the times it's actually because that person really wants to feel heard. They want to feel seen. They want to feel validated. And so as a leader, I think it's really our job to be aware of who's speaking a lot and who's not speaking at all. And one thing you might want to try is to say to that person, I hear you. I really appreciate the voice and perspective that you're bringing. And I would love to hear, are there other people in the group that would like to contribute as well? And I think that's one way to help that person feel seen and heard and invite others to contribute to the space. Doesn't always work, but I do think it works a lot of the time, enough to where you acknowledge that person and invite other voices in.
So, Jodie, in the context of meetings, and of the comments that you've brought up, I think is so poignant, is around how a lot of times people leverage meetings as information sharing. When you do that, so let's say we have a weekly status with our whole team, everybody does know the intent, but the level of engagement is usually pretty static. How would you encourage in those types of situations for there to be more collaboration, more individuals coming?
One of the things that I mentioned earlier that I think is so important is the importance of having a clear purpose for any meeting. And that actually goes also with weekly meetings, right? So saying that we have a weekly meeting each week, people don't know how to show up, right? But if you say, okay, we have a weekly meeting, but the purpose of that weekly meeting is going to shift each week, right? And by defining that clear purpose, then people will know how to show up in a deeper way. I'll give you an example, right? It might be that the theme of the meeting this week is sharing a story of impact. And what we want to do is invite each person, no matter what their role is on the team, to come with, hey, how do they define impact within their scope of work? And B, what's a story of impact that they've had within their work that really showcases the impact that our team makes? That completely changes the dynamic of the meeting. A, it empowers people to show up prepared. And B, people feel like they have a voice. They feel like they have something to contribute.
That's great. And in those cases, when you do that, I think that helps set the tone, right? The upfront. But so like, for example, I'm just personal experience.
Please bring it in. This is our space to vent, to share. Yes.
We're helping all of you work besties out there. So in my particular instance, I think of what? Claude, you want to come off mute? What were you saying?
I say we decide who we want to come in our podcast, depending on what we need.
What we need to get accomplished.
Professionally and personally.
Yeah, so I was thinking, so I have a couple, and this is actually more around, we have joint team meetings where the intent is just stated, it's for cross-sharing. So each week we're all supposed to talk about the projects we're working on. In many cases, it becomes a list of people asking my team for work and or following up with stuff that we share with them. And there isn't always cross-sharing. So we have started to propose out, here's the list of things we want to share, here's the specific things we'd love to cover off with you. And I have found it's a little more effective, and it does keep the conversation going. From there, though, where I would love to get your perspective on is, how do you continue that without always having to be the one to lead that? Because these are weekly meetings, right? And us having to come up with a fresh new question to help create that connection when you start, it's also a lot of work. And it is something I think from an organizational standpoint, everybody should own. And yes, the manager can help facilitate that. But in these types of meetings, I'm coming together with peers as well as our direct reports. So for me to constantly lead that, it seems like there's an opportunity for more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think in a scenario like this, we often think that collaboration is about asking questions or sharing what do I do, what do you do, right? But I think what might it look like to really reframe it around collaboration as what might we be able to learn from one another, right? So what might it even look like to have an exercise where you invite people to share on one large piece of Post-it paper, what's one thing that you can contribute to this space? One way in which you can contribute, and on another large Post-it paper, what's one skill that you're looking to learn? And, right, and then inviting each group member to actually put something up there next to their name, right? So you're not just surfacing this in real time, but it's an opportunity for help and support beyond this meeting. It's creating that invitation. It's not saying you don't have to do this, but by creating the invitation, it allows us to surface what our real needs are in real time, what we can offer and where we want to learn. And that actually creates the space for a great organic connection to happen. And I think I would argue that in our work, that often leads to the most successful collaboration, right? When we start by creating more organic connections.
Okay. So based off of that, so again, let's say this is a monthly meeting. Your thought is kick off with one of them, create this safe space for people to come up with things that they want to contribute, things that they want to learn. And then we almost use that as the outline for the upcoming meetings to continue and foster it. Am I synthesizing that right? All right.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a few ways you could do this, right? One, in real time, invite someone to actually go up to that list and say, what's one thing you want to learn? Go find that person right now in this group. Like, let's actually start that conversation.
Got it.
And then at the end of the meeting, right, invite people to share, okay, what's one thing you want to learn? And who is that person that you want to learn it from? given this list, now go up to them and make a time throughout the next week to actually sit and have lunch together or meet by the water cooler or have that 10-minute Zoom and actually learn that thing. And then in our next meeting, we'll come back together and talk about what did that feel like? What did we now learn? And that's just one strategy that can help us see that we're humans, right? We are skilled people. There are so many skills that we have to contribute. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And we have so many skills to contribute, and it's our job to help create sort of that space in order to do that.
What are the most common issues, problems that you see happening in meetings?
Oh, okay. So many. Oh, where do we start? I know. Okay. So there are a few things. One is connection, starting with connection building activities, right? What I see usually is that a connection building activity is just a random idea, a random icebreaker that somebody's thought of, okay? A lot like, what's your favorite ice cream, right? And the responses take way too much time. And so what happens is a leader will actually say, this connection building activity takes way too much time. No more connection building activities in our meetings, right? Rather than thinking about how there's a real strategy and intention behind how we build them, they think that since that one activity doesn't work, we get rid of the whole thing, right? Which is
right.
savage, right?
Right,
Savage.
Yeah.
And it sends a real message to the group, right? That connection does not belong here, that I don't belong here if I can't share pieces of who I am. That's the first one. I think the second one is also, right, recognizing that connection is one size fits all, that there's only one, right? But connection's really multisensory, right? It doesn't just happen through speaking. It happens through creating activities that allow us to really like listen to others, to get up and walk around, right? Connection doesn't have to just be a question, right? There are so many different ways in order to build connection, whether you're in a virtual Zoom room or you're in person. I think another big thing that I see a lot is that, there's no clear purpose to meetings, right? This meeting could have been an email, and that is the worst, right? And that's when you get to see those signs of disconnection, right? And usually the signs of disconnection are all in body language, right? You see people slumping back in their chair, falling asleep, yawning,
On their other
eyes,
phone, scrolling on their phone,
Yes. And right. And in those scenarios, a lot of times leaders try and assert control rather than get curious around what's not working. And that's something that I see a lot with a lot of organizations that I work with.
Thank you. I want to go back in the building activity, because how can you make it more authentic? Because we've all been in those meetings where, someone's saying, let's do the favorite ice cream, and everybody is rolling their eyes and saying, I don't have time for this thing. I need, whatever, because sometimes it's not always authentic. How can you change that to make it that it's really something we want to do?
Excellent. So I like to say that there are icebreakers out there. Icebreakers are just connection questions that are random, right? Like, what's your favorite ice cream? And then there are relational strategies, right? Relational strategies are connection building activities that actually serve a purpose. They align with the content of the meeting. I'll give you an example. So let's say we are in a meeting and they are about to unroll a new strategic plan in this meeting, and they're trying to invite people to see it from a new perspective. Okay. And so, right, I would start with a relational strategy that invites people to understand how to look at something with a new perspective. So the strategy I would use, or the game I might use, is to take a look at the letters in your name, right? I'm Jodie. The letters in my name are Jodie. And to come up with a word in your name that describes something about who you are. So for example, the three letters in my name are Joe for Joe, like a cup of coffee. I'm a coffee connoisseur. Okay. You would never know this about me, but I love craft coffee, right? And so what that does is it's actually a strategy that invites me to take a look at my name, something I look at every day, and see a new perspective within that. And that's a great way to frame the next section of the meeting, which is all about taking a look at something with a new perspective.
Thank you. So it's not just a gratis thing of saying, what's your ice cream, but really coming up in the meeting for a purpose.
Exactly, right? You would never make a move in chess without a strategy. And the same thing goes with how we build out relationships, right? We have to really think about it with intentionality. And if we put the same amount of time and energy in thinking about connection as we did the content of a meeting, I think people would really feel like they belong more deeply in our spaces.
You hit on a really good point there. So when individuals who are leading certain meetings are coming up with the content, what would be your coaching on kind of balance of moving of the content versus the moving of the connection?
Yeah, I think it would be first understanding the group. Who is this group, right? Like, is it a big group? Are they familiar with each other? Are there inter-team dynamics that are just important for us to know about, right? Like,
Right.
that's real, right? And we
Right.
have
Oh, yeah.
to create based on what's real in front of us,
Right.
not based on some like vision of a utopian
Everybody
movie.
gets along and is holding hands and singing Kumbaya.
Exactly. Like, and that's beautiful and aspirational, but that is to hell, it is not real. It is so not real. And we can't pretend that that's real. So to think about a bunch of these key factors around the group's needs, and then to think about the length of the meeting, right? If the meeting's an hour, right? It might be that this group needs a lot of support. So maybe actually we would spend half the meeting creating and deepening that relationship versus bringing the content, right? But it's really about thinking strategically about what the group needs and how we can ensure the group feels seen and heard so that when we introduce the content, they feel ready to listen, to engage, and they feel empowered to contribute.
I love that. Right. I do want to go back to some of the meetings because I know our Work Bestie community has commented a lot about burnout and stress, and a lot of that has to do with them feeling they're constantly in meetings that don't give them the time to further what their actual tasks at hand are. Oh, you commented earlier on about making sure people feel they understand the intent of the meeting, making sure there's a balance between the connection and the content of the meeting. Now we're all getting these meeting togethers. We feel these connections. We really do understand that. But at the end of the day, some of these meetings are meant to make decisions. So from that perspective, what would you see as next steps to ensure that would be effective in certain meetings?
I think what a great meeting does is creates the space for people to feel like they contribute. I see a lot of leaders try and exercise control in a meeting, and an excellent meeting isn't about exercising control. It's about creating the space to hear different voices and perspectives. And then a great facilitator will pause and say, okay, now we've heard from all of you around your ideas around X. Now we're going to transition from our visioning to decision making. Making the implicit explicit is a key strategy in helping us make decisions and meetings. And it's also a cue to those in the meetings that now it's time to stop brainstorming and visioning and to start making decisions. And we need those cues. And oftentimes, leaders or whoever's running the meeting doesn't plan for that, right? They just say, we're going to have this meeting, not a lot of agenda time, right? We might do a connection. Connection takes 45 minutes, doesn't leave us enough time for brainstorming. And then, whoops, the meeting's over, right? So I think a great meeting makes the implicit explicit and creates that clear space for decision-making time.
Totally agree with that. In the case where the meeting has potentially spent a little more time on the connection or the sharing of the ideas, don't we also need a facilitator, though, to make sure that we aren't butting up against 30-second, 2-minute, 1-minute mark to make that quick decision? Is it the role of a facilitator, or do you feel there's ways they could encourage? How do we create the space to actually then come up with the decision?
I agree with that. And, right, I also think that in meetings, we often think that we are confined to the time, right? And it actually might be.
Right. In some cases, yeah.
Right? A gap between what we thought the time, how long this would take, and what's actually happening. And that's also where a facilitator might say, okay, I'm recognizing, right? Making the implicit explicit. I'm recognizing that actually what the group needs here is a little bit more time to make this decision. And so we may need an answer by Thursday. So here are my 2 next steps, right? Of how I might go about it. I think part of it is recognizing also just like the clear needs of the group.
So be also at the beginning of the meeting, like I don't like to say agenda, but what is the goal of the meeting? Where we need to make a decision from the start saying, okay, time to think, but at the end, the hour of the meeting, decision needs to be made.
Listen, that's true too, right? And if a decision needs to be made, then that's going to be super clear in the purpose before the meeting, right? We articulate the purpose of a meeting, not when we get to the meeting, but that purpose should be clear on our calendar and in an email beforehand. A great meeting has an agenda that's sent before that's a reflection of that purpose. And then it's reiterated again when we get to that meeting, right? Here's the purpose of the meeting. Here's the agenda of the meeting. And I'm curious, any questions so that we feel like we can be on the same page towards that?
Yeah.
And here's what we need to do. Yeah, Claude, 100%. But it shouldn't be, that meeting shouldn't be the first time we're hearing that. And
No,
I think
of
that's
course.
the biggest point.
But
Yeah.
because I think that reconvening afterwards is nothing more frustrating than that. If the meeting was about, we have to make decision, it went at the end of the meeting, no decision, and then we have to reconvene.
Well, no,
15 minutes.
I
that
think
is
so that was my question. Does it make sense to cut people off and say, you don't have time to share anymore, or to let them share?
Totally.
And it seems like in many cases, you still want to let them share, but you say, guess what? I need you to have the answer to me by the end of the day. So that means we're going to send out a survey question, or I'm going to make the collective decision on my own. And you just clarify that. It's just a balance. It's a balance, right? Because some of that is connection. Like if people want to feel seen and heard, you got to let them say some of the
but
stuff.
sometimes you can't always be seen and
True.
heard for every meeting.
Feeling seen and heard doesn't have to be saying things, right? Maybe we give everyone a whiteboard or a piece of paper and say, what's your response? Write it down here and hold it up. Or hand it to me. We tend to think that feeling seen and heard is only speaking. What's amazing too is we think that these tools like Poll Everywhere are just for virtual meetings, right? But what could it look like to actually do a poll live in a room, right? To do a pulse check from the group to see how people are feeling around certain things, and to use that as a really quick data point to be able to make a decision, right? So I think, and sometimes that's actually a way that people feel even more seen and heard, right? We're making the assumption that, again, speaking is comfortable for everyone. It's not actually, right?
Right, yeah.
Those extroverts or people who get their energy from speaking, or the people who feel like, I'm sure you know these people, I definitely do, who don't know what they want to say yet. So they talk more in order to figure that out, right? And yet there are so many people who have such thoughtful responses that actually aren't that comfortable sharing aloud, that really want to be able to share with maybe just one other person in the space.
Yeah, they're great ideas, because I do think you wind up hearing some of the most impactful, unique, and distinct perspective from those individuals that don't always like to be the first to raise their hand or even talk out loud. Outside of using surveys, are there other things you can think of that could help encourage and almost like flattening the playing field so everybody's voice does truly get heard?
One of my favorite strategies to use, especially when you're in a big group, is the strategy I like to call think, pair, share. So I don't know if you've heard of this before, but in a meeting, what I'll love to invite people to do is I'll give them a prompt. What's your favorite ice cream? You invite people to actually take a moment and think about it, to write it down. What's that favorite ice cream flavor and what does it say about you? Write it down. Because a lot of us actually need time and space to think about a response before sharing, and we're often not given it. So give everyone 1 to 2 minutes to write down their response and then to actually share it with a partner. Sharing it with one other person just gives you an opportunity to test it out. I could say I love Rocky Road because, it's filled with all kinds of, marshmallows and nuts, right? And it's got lots of energy in it, right? And if I share it just with you and Claude, right? You could be like, oh, Jodie, I learned so much about you, right? It's my way of workshopping it. And it's a way for us to get to know each other in a smaller group. And then as a facilitator, I might say after, I give everyone a few minutes to share in their small group, okay, I'd love to be able to hear who in their group would feel comfortable, right? Something that they learned about someone else's ice cream flavor. And it's such a great way for me to raise my hand. And let's say, Jess, you love chocolate vanilla swirl, right? I could say, I just learned something new about Jess. She loves chocolate vanilla swirl, which is a metaphor for the many identities that she's holding. I don't know what it might be, but it's such a great way to...
That feels on brand for me. Thank you.
And I didn't mean to make an assumption about that, but how cool, right? You got to got to know one or two other people. And
Right.
instead of saying who wants to share, I might say who learned something in
Right.
this case. And what did you learn?
Right. So you're giving, a person who doesn't like to talk, but you get to learn about them still. So in essence, they're indirectly sharing. I love that.
And it gives people an opportunity to respond in the way that feels really comfortable for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there needs to be more of that because based off of time crunches and just the grind of meetings, I think a lot of us get in rooms, talk about what the options are, and then just move forward. There's not that pause to say, am I thinking about the connectivity of the team and how and in which way everyone in this room would feel most comfortable to contribute? That is something I don't always feel is first and foremost in a lot of meetings. Yeah.
I feel like we tend to watch movies and see meetings in a really big boardroom and think that that's what we need to emulate. But actually, right, I think that that's hindering our ability to be creative. One thing we haven't touched on that I think is so important is the design of a meeting space. I like to say that physical space dictates experience. When we're in a room and there's a really, 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 really long table and I can barely see the people that are down there, right? I feel so disconnected from what's happening on that side of the room, right? So actually, what might it look like to go from having one big long board table to having 3 or 4 smaller tables where people actually can feel like they're seeing each other and they can connect with one another? We often think that meetings need to happen in boardrooms, but what could happen if a meeting happened outside because it's a beautiful day and we're actually leveraging that people need to get up. They've been sitting all day. And if we cater to their personal needs, they're actually going to be able to show up in a deeper, more meaningful way.
So they've given us a lot of great ideas for how to really host a meeting and connection with your teams and teams around you. What's the biggest misconception about meetings in general?
It's something that we touched on that I really want to underscore, which is that meetings need to take 1 hour or 30 minutes, right? That productivity is directly related to time, right? Actually, I find that the most productive meetings are not based on time. They're based on intentional design, right? So I can design a great 15-minute meeting that could be productive, or I could design a great 60-minute meeting that could also be productive. It's all about how we intentionally design. And if we design with intention, then it can lead to greater productivity. And it can be 15 minutes, it can be 30 minutes, it can be 45, it can be an hour.
I would love it to be the 15.
And it's possible. It's possible. What could it look like if instead of one 60-minute meeting, we had 4 15-minute meetings throughout the day?
Give yourself the couple of minutes to think for the next step.
Exactly. And everyone would show up fresh.
Yeah, it's interesting. Most important question of the whole podcast. Do you have a work bestie?
Oh, I love this. Okay. So now I feel like I've made 2 new work besties here. And Jess and Claude, thank you for having me. Very honored. I will tell you, as someone who owns their own business, I'm the founder and principal of Flourish Consulting, and I have another consultant who I look to for collaboration, for thought partnership. We work together within an organization, and we are 20 years apart in age. She's 20 years older than me, and she has taught me so much about who I am and the person that I want to be. And it's beautiful. As we've both started our own businesses, we are there. We each hold complementary strengths, and it's our job to hold each other accountable and to really challenge each other. And we're on it, and it's beautiful.
I love that. That's amazing.
Opportunity to learn with and from you, to connect. It really just so much fun. You both exemplify what it means to be in connection and relationship and to be those work besties.
Jodie, if people want to learn more about you, how can they do that?
Feel free to find me on LinkedIn. My handle is Jodie Goldberg. I'm also doing TikTok videos to help you learn new relational strategies to elevate your meetings and gatherings. And finally, you can visit my website, www.flourishconsultinginc.com. Would love the opportunity to learn more about you and to partner.
Jodie, this has been awesome.
Thank you
so much. So besties out there, I end this to your other besties. Help prevent them from continuing to have bad meetings, and make sure you exemplify it by saying, guess what? Maybe your meeting could have been an email.
So to all the work besties out there, keep supporting each other.
Remember, whether you're swapping snacks in the break room, rescuing each other from endless meetings, or just sending that perfectly timed meme. Having a work bestie is like having your own personal hype squad.
So keep lifting each other up, laughing through the chaos, and of course, thriving. Until next time, stay positive, stay productive, and don't forget to keep supporting each other.